All right, coach. So where do you see Fnatic succeeding in this current roster compared to the previous one?
Hmm. I think just just the fact that Hilly and Bwipo are working together much more closely on the map. Like it was a long distance relationship. There was these TPs, they're like vacations back where you come for a weekend and you visit, but there's a sadness building because Hilly knew all the time that Bwipo at some point needed to go top and catch that wave, and I think with this proximity to each other, they can have a close and loving relationship, and I think it's going to bring a lot of great moments for us. And, I think at the core, uh, mid jungle support, how these roles function together. I think these three guys they operate on the same wavelength. I feel like they can discuss things and reach good conclusions and actively improve. Almost for me without interaction. Like sometimes I just see them talk. They are talking away, and I'm like just listening. Just keeping a checkbooks. They talked about this. They talked about this. They talked about this. Okay, my job is done. I didn't do anything. That brings me joy. That inherent ability and the idea that they actually want to move forward and improve and to keep the lessons from spring and apply them from summer because a lot of people they see the 3-0 versus Schalke and maybe that looks terrible, but for me, you know that's just a wealth of information that we can apply to summer. And every one of those guys in the other room, I hear them exercising right now. They are ready to apply it in summer, so I'm excited.
Let's start off by looking back at the spring split. Curious to hear from your perspective, what do you think that didn't work with the team, and what do you think that did work?
Honestly, I think the biggest mistake we just did was how we set our expectations. I think after some of the guys were at the World Championship, they took top esports to 5 games, and me building up this image of what it would be to join Fnatic for a very long time. We kind of set the wrong expectations. I think for the case of my players, when you bring in a new coach, you bring in two new players, the dynamic shifts, and there are certain things that you might take for granted that were very basic in the previous alteration of the roster. Maybe is not something that is as basic in that current alteration of the roster. And I think we didn't keep that open-mindedness at the beginning of the split. And in my eyes, I had the expectation, in my mind, I built up what it would be to join Fnatic for 10 years. I've been competing in league and always in the back of everyone's mind is like joining Fnatic, maybe joining G2, those are the two big ones if you want to compete at the highest level in Europe. And I think in that I lost the things that I believe in and my coaching philosophy. And I think all of us kind of realized this that we are missing out on the basics, and a lot of the wins that we were getting were just steals. So we managed to realize this, but then we got hit with the whole COVID situation. Like I was sick for 2 weeks, I was just out of it, and we had other players that were sick, and we're just a rotation for 5 to 6 weeks of someone being sick, and that's also something that is very, very problematic. And I think the expectations that we've set for summer have been more properly measured, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. I think if I look at the things that went right, I think we had some moments where the players showed what they're capable of individually. I think our bot lane played super, super well together and worked on the synergy a lot. I think that's something that carries over. I think the individual skill and the belief I have in the players still remains. And I think it's just about making sure that we agree what our basic fundamentals are and we don't, take certain aspects of the game for granted.
What brought you back down? You mentioned that you had all this expectation and things didn't go as planned. At what point did you realize that maybe things were going to be a little bit different, and what did you do to apply this change into the team?
It was just, for me personally, it was a lot of soul searching. I think by the time we came to these realizations, it was a bit too late out. Even though we had 2 very good weeks of practice coming into playoffs, um, the Schalke day was just the epitome of all of our flaws that we've built up over the spring split. And I think sometimes it's tougher from outside to judge how close you are to actually being good, because there were a lot of things that we did that were good, but we built up some habits that were tough to crack at the end of the split. And now we're taking the approach of making sure that we build good habits from day one and that we address some of the issues that can be lingering. Because in the beginning, it was, you have a bunch of players that just took Esports to 5 games, and they have a certain standard that they want to play by. They just, their most recent memory of competing was against um, a very, very good team, and they practice over in China and so forth. And I think whenever you bring a couple of new players into the mix, then dynamic shifts. And I think that's something that we missed, because I remember some of the conversations we had in the beginning of spring. It was like, oh, we should work on this, Abro. It's like, yeah, this is too easy. This is basic. Everyone should know this. And I'm like, okay, maybe there's something I'm missing here, because I look at Bwipo, I look at Hilly. These are guys that have beaten me, in the past. And with time, we realized that this is a new dynamic. We need to figure out what works for us. And I think we were just way too late out, because spring splits, honestly, the other teams figured out how they want to play the game. And I think that matters more than having strong individual players. And having strong individual players begins to matter when you actually figure out what your basics are. So we are starting from there coming into summer.
All right, sounds good. And talking about this shifting of mentality and jumping onto the shifting of players and how things have changed in Fnatic. Just very recently, you guys announced that Selfmade is leaving, and I wanted to dive into a little bit of what prompted his departure from the team.
Well, as a coach, I always need to, there are two things in my mind always, is to make sure that all of the players that depart and also the players that are involved in the project are happy. And the second thing is that I need to make sure that we are as strategically competitive as possible. And in regards to future seasons, we need to also take opportunities into consideration. Adam is a player that, of course, has a lot of hype built around him. I think he has great potential. I think mechanically he's very talented. His mindset is in a really, really good place, and he keeps his motivation very, very close to heart. And I've enjoyed the weeks that I've worked with him so far. And sometimes, you need to make decisions that support the organization for the long term. It's very common in esports to think about things very short term, and Adam is a long term commitment. So this is a player that we want to shape and build in the roster, and it was natural for us to move in that direction, because Fnatic has the obligation to secure the future and not only think about the most and the most close competition that we have.
Absolutely. When I went to the LEC studio for playoffs, I had the opportunity to speak to Bwipo, and I remember that at the time there was a conversation regarding the scarcity of top lane talent in Europe, and about Adam mentioned that he was a brilliant player and that he reminded him a lot of himself in the way that he plays the game. Yeah, and it was just the way he spoke about it was really adorable. But I'm wondering, at what point did you guys end up noticing him?
I think it's something that we've just been paying attention to constantly. I
Hmm.
think any organization worth its salt needs to be on the constant lookout for any movement. We need to be constantly scouting. It's a 365-day a year process where there are moments of brilliance that you need to pay attention to, and you need to be ready to make the aggressive moves. Uh, when I try to think of the timing, I don't necessarily remember the specific timing. It's just Adam is good. Let's keep paying attention to him. If things make sense for us, we're going to make the moves that support the ideals and the values that Fnatic want to have in their team and also to cement the future further.
All right, and now still on the topic of Bwipo, he's role swapping to jungle, right? How are you approaching this move? How are you both approaching? Because I feel like it's unfair to just ask about you.
Well, I was, in my mind, I think if Bwipo wanted to, he could play any role in the game. And I don't think this is the first time. Well, I know it's not the first time that this topic has come up. He played AD carry as well. He switched and he, fit like a glove to playing together with Hilly-san. And I think in terms of his game knowledge, it's so vast and applicable in every position. I think that goes such a long way. I think when it comes to him, uh, role swapping, I think naturally it just makes sense for a player like him. And I think historically, there's been many success stories of it working well because you approach a role with a very fresh perspective. What Whipple has in his mind is going to be very, very different from the other junglers, and I think that's going to create a massive edge. He's undergone this task of switching roles in the past, and I think there's a lot of things that cross over because him naturally as a player, he always looked at top lane as a role where you need to solve the puzzle of how you make yourself useful because often there's a lot of top laners that just view top lane as an island and they just play for CSDs, but in the end that's not going to win you games. And Weibo was always looking out for ways to impact bot lane, impact mid, impact the game, and constantly be active. And I think when I think about these traits, junglers are naturally like that. And I think, with me, Kevin, Tolki, I think everyone could really, really easily imagine the idea of Whipple going into jungle. I think that cooperation between jungle and support is also something that was a big speaking point for it because Hilly and Whipple just function in the same way. They play on the same wavelength, and it shows already in practice. We haven't practiced that many scrim days, but already they are looking very lethal, just like they did back when they played ball lane together.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to bring up, honestly. So would you say then that Bwipo is basically, tutoring Adam and shaping him, or are you guys kind of giving him the freedom to explore top lane in his own style?
And Woodward has his hands full with the big house jumbo right now, so
Fair.
I don't want to put the additional pressure on him to also help Adam. Adam is currently exploring himself and finding how he can use his skills the best in the team right now, and he's listening to feedback. He's integrating with the team super super well because four of the guys played of course in spring, and you know uh, it's perfect because Adam, even though he's just 19 years old, like he is so active with the guys. He can talk with the guys. He's very emotionally intelligent, and in general, it's just working very, very fluid in terms of how we can give feedback to each other and how we work together. Because I like to use the players as coaches, so to speak, because they know so much and they can teach each other so much. And I think most of the learning occurs when you talk to people directly one to one or in the two to one. And I make sure to use the players in all departments because I think there's crossover between every lane and how they work together. So Adam is improving, Book improving. I have nothing to complain about.
Perfect. I did hear Bo mentioning that if he feels like he is not performing his best, he doesn't feel like he's fit for a team, which obviously it breaks everyone's heart. Bo is dear to so many LoL esports fans, but keeping it this vision in mind, let's think of his role swap. Do you think that this is something that is long term, or is this sort of like a until the end of the split or until the end of the year sort of deal?
I think Bwipo is so smart and so strong as a player that he can keep all doors open for himself for a very long time. I don't think he needs to make such a commitment. I think if things change for him at some point where it makes sense for him to shift, I think he'll always be capable of doing that. Bwipo, you know. in his rookie year in the LEC, went to the World Finals, and that was back in 2018. And if I look at some of the other careers of some of the more premier players and legendary players that we have in Europe, he has a lot of time on his hands. He's no at all because he's indeed a legendary player. I think he's going to stick around for a very, very long time, and I I think he's just his own harshest critic. Uh, I'm sure that people will stick around. He loves competing too much, and he loves that feeling of beating someone at the game that they also have spent many hours of playing. So I think that addiction will keep him in the mix.
Now, on the subject of Selfmade leaving, it's been I wouldn't say common knowledge, but it's been known that he has signed with Vitality for only 6 months, and that there is a possibility, supposedly, of him returning to Fnatic later on in his career. What would you say about that?
Yeah, it's tough to make any predictions. If someone asked me that I would be now here at the beginning of spring, I would have said, give me some of the crack you're smoking, because I want to flush it down the toilet. I wouldn't dare to touch it myself. Uh, I think it's hard to predict. I think with esports, it's so tough to predict. Everything ebbs and flows, and there is forces that are moving that are stronger than I am. At the end of the day, the only way I view things is, the 5 players I have, that's who I'm committing to. I don't see any other players. I want to work in a way as if this is my last team. These are my last players. Nothing else exists because I think this is the only way that I can truly give myself to a project. And it was the same thing with Oscar on the roster. Like in my mind, we could have been in a world where the roster would have stayed the same, and I was ready to take upon that challenge. And I know Oscar was too. But things move, and there are certain things that you know everyone needs to consider when it comes to the long-term business of Fnatic. And in the end, decisions are made, right? And I'm very happy with where we are. I think strategically, this is, a really, really great opportunity. I think people will be very surprised with how quick people will learn. And I know that the community is very fast to judge because they don't understand the level that players like Bwipo and Hilly operate under, and they just see
Right.
someone dying and they think, yeah, he did something bad. Someone got killed, and someone else did something good. And I think the game has so much more depth than that. And I think when Whippo and Hilly, now with them working together, we can bring the team on the same wavelength, and we can forge what our basics are. I think we can cause some serious damage in the LEC, and then furthermore in the World Championship too.
All right, coach. So where do you see Fnatic succeeding in this current roster compared to the previous one?
Hmm. I think just just the fact that Hilly and Bwipo are working together much more closely on the map. Like it was a long distance relationship. There was these TPs, they're like vacations back where you come for a weekend and you visit, but there's a sadness building because Hilly knew all the time that Bwipo at some point needed to go top and catch that wave, and I think with this proximity to each other, they can have a close and loving relationship, and I think it's going to bring a lot of great moments for us. And, I think at the core, uh, mid jungle support, how these roles function together. I think these 3 guys, they operate on the same wavelength. I feel like they can discuss things and reach good conclusions and actively improve, almost for me without interaction. Like sometimes I just see them talk, they are talking away, and I'm like just listening. Just keeping a checkbooks. They talked about this, they talk about this, they talk about this. Okay, my job is done. I didn't do anything. That brings me joy. That inherent ability and the idea that they actually want to move forward and improve, and to keep the lessons from spring and apply them from summer. Because a lot of people, they see the 3-0 versus Schalke, and maybe that looks terrible, but for me, you know That's just a wealth of information that we can apply to summer. And every one of those guys in the other room, I hear them exercising right now. They are ready to apply it in some. So I'm excited.
I'm
Feels good.
excited too. Yeah, and hearing you say that you're excited gives me a lot of hope for Fnatic. So this is great. I super appreciate your time. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the LEC.
Thanks for watching. For more gaming related content, subscribe to the Esports YouTube channel